Have you ever experienced the hand of the Lord in your life and been obedient to his word, only to find yourself all alone? Have you been walking with him and suddenly realized that he was nowhere to be found? Has God ever asked you to do something for him, and the moment you begin, he's gone? Well, I have to answer yes to all the above, and it's puzzled me for many years. I spent countless hours seeking the answer, but it never came. Not until reading a familiar scripture not too long ago. Hi, I'm Pastor Tom. This morning I want us to think about something that affects all of us on our journey with the Lord through this life. Why is it always in a storm? And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to see if we can find some answers to that question. But let's start by going back to a late afternoon on the beach by the Sea of Galilee. The disciples had just witnessed one of Jesus' greatest miracles. One little boy's lunch so marvelously supplied that it fed 5,000 men plus all their families. Now, standing here in 2021, I simply can't imagine how awestruck I would have been to witness such a miracle. The disciples had to be in complete awe of the power of their master. I think if I'd have been one of the disciples, my chest would have been just a little puffed up at being viewed as part of his inner circle. So, they all bathed in the moment, right? No. Even before the multitudes departed, Jesus sent his disciples on a journey. Well, he didn't just send them, he ordered them. Matthew 14:22 and 23. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there all alone. The King James says that he constrained them. That's a pretty strong word. In the Greek, it's anahokazo, which means to compel or to drive with force. It indicates to me that the disciples didn't want Jesus to go. Jesus hadn't yet dismissed the crowd, and perhaps they didn't want to miss anything. Maybe he was going to perform an even greater miracle. And as they got into the boat on that calm afternoon, I'm pretty sure they were confused and maybe even a little bit upset. What was he going to do? Why did they have to leave? What boat was going to take him to the other side? These questions no doubt rolled around in their minds as they set their oars in motion. But what they didn't understand was that Jesus has an agenda that doesn't always include our presence and or our input. Jesus knew that if he didn't send this crowd away, they were going to try to force him to lead them into a revolution against Rome, and he didn't want his disciples to be there. So he withdrew after setting the more important part of his plan in motion. John 6:14-15. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who has come into the world." Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. The crowd was interested in the man who fed them bread and fish, but Jesus had another kind of bread in mind. So with the crowd dispersing and the disciples straining against their oars, Jesus went up into the mountain to pray. Do you suppose he didn't know the storm was about to rise up in the middle of the sea? Is it possible that it caught him by surprise? No, I don't think so either. Mark tells us that while Jesus was on the mountain in prayer, he had his eye on his disciples. Mark 6:47 and 48. And when evening came, the boat was out on the sea, and he was alone on the land. And he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. And about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. He meant to pass them by. The King James Version uses the word basanizo, which actually means they were in great pain and torment. They were toiling and being tossed about. They were in the midst of that storm, all alone, in the dark, and without Jesus. Now, this didn't happen quickly. It took quite a while to develop. Remember that Jesus had just fed the multitude around supper time, and so there was most likely a little daylight left when the disciples set out. Let's just suppose they set out at 6 o'clock in the evening. Jesus watched them toil for at least 9 hours, because they didn't see him again until sometime during the fourth watch. between 3 and 6 o'clock in the morning. So Jesus sent them out full well knowing the circumstances that would soon surround them. So to our question, what do we know about the storms in our life? We always need to be prepared because God always has a plan for us in the storm. You know, Jesus never sends us out without fully knowing what we're going to encounter and with a certain understanding of what he wants to accomplish through those circumstances. And it always seems that at some point in our trial, the darkness sets in. We can count on it. That darkness always seems to make our situation or our circumstances that much more difficult to see and understand. But the moment we think the darkness is about to overwhelm us, in the very instant that Jesus will arrive in the light of his presence. Look at Psalm 139, 11 and 12. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. In fact, it seems as though Jesus is the most real in the midst of our storms, doesn't it? About Isaiah 43, 1 and 2. But now thus says the Lord, he who created you, O Jacob, he who formed you, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. Jesus has always been the God of the fourth watch. It was true for Israel, and it's no different for us. Look at Exodus 14, 24 and 25. And in the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire and of cloud looked down on the Egyptian forces and threw the Egyptian forces into a panic, clogging their chariot wheels so that they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, let us flee from Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. So there's something else we need to do in the midst of our storm. We need to remember that Jesus is never deterred by that storm. We can be certain that Jesus is up there watching our journey. In fact, his Spirit is there in the midst of the storm with us while we're toiling in the darkness of our circumstances. But he will often wait until the fourth watch before he comes. He will wait until all of our human strength and resources are exhausted and we have come to the end of ourselves. Why? Just so he can prove that he's God and we aren't? No. God always has a reason for his plans, and that usually means waiting until we have come to the end of ourselves. Matthew, Mark, and John all tell us that the disciples were in fear and just about at the point of being totally overcome by the sea. They quote Jesus when he told them to fear not. But if he knew they were going to be overcome with fear, why did he send them out in the first place? Well, I've learned in my life that's just how Jesus works. He takes his time. Remember, he waited 2 days before he came to Lazarus, and his plan was to strengthen their faith. Look at John 11, 14 to 15. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. Let us go unto him. Strong faith and spiritual maturity don't happen overnight. They're built up in the storms that come up from time to time over our life here on earth. And the Word tells us why. Again, look at Isaiah 28, 9 and 10. To whom he will teach knowledge, and to whom will he explain the message? Those who are weaned from the milk, those taken from the breast? For it is a precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little. You know, I used to think that Jesus really made the disciples suffer just so they could witness his miracle of walking on the water. Well, as usual, I missed the point completely. It wasn't about Jesus walking on the water at all. It was all about him coming to their rescue at the last moment, when they were overcome with fear and lack of faith. That's what we have to learn. No matter what the circumstances are, no matter how difficult they are, Jesus will always come at the fourth watch and rescue his bride. The question for us, will we be standing in faith and looking for him to show up? We need to be prepared for the storms in our life that seem to blow up out of nowhere. And at the same time, remember that no matter how big the storm we face is, Jesus is never deterred by it. And he'll come. Now, next week, we'll look at 3 more things that we need to remember in the midst of our storm that help us to remember why those storms always seem to come out of nowhere and that they're there for a reason. So our challenge this week is to begin looking at the storms in our life with a different perspective than just trying to get through them. We need to be prepared ahead of time because there's always a storm that will blow up in the midst of our sunny days. And at the same time, we need to keep our eyes off the storm and by faith look for Jesus. He will always come and quiet the wind and the waves of our circumstances. So thanks for joining us here each week. And if you haven't subscribed and liked us, please do and share these weekly videos to help us get the message out to the bride of Christ, to look up in the midst of her storm and set her eyes on Jesus. He will always come in response to her faith. So until next Wednesday morning, remember, I'm here to help you on your journey from the cross to spiritual maturity. Now have a great week in Jesus, and God bless.